Okay. Our mission. Helping Parents Heal is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting bereaved parents to become shining light parents by providing support and resources to aid in the healing process. We go a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and evidence for the afterlife in a non-dogmatic way. Affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non-religious background. Attendance today at this meeting is voluntary, and we are here for the benefit of learning from and sharing with other parents whose child has passed away. It is understood that our discussions are intended to be confidential and not designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers to allow parents to be informed about many possible ways to heal, to connect with their children, and to learn about the afterlife. The views expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect those of Helping Parents Heal, and we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Irene. And I am so thrilled to have Debra with us. I'm going to just read a short bio for her. And again, I just truly appreciate that she's here. Debra Diamond, Ph.D., is a former Wall Street money manager, professor at Johns Hopkins University, and regular commentator on CNBC. In 2008, she had a transformational experience that left her with unconventional powers as a psychic and medium. Today, Dr. Diamond is a spiritual teacher and author, sharing her experience with others who've encountered an extraordinary event for which no logical explanation exists. She is the best-selling author of Diary of a Death Doula, 25 Lessons the Dying Teach Us About the Afterlife, and Life After Near Death, Miraculous Stories of Healing and Transformation in the Extraordinary Lives of People with Newfound Powers. I am thrilled that she's here with us tonight. Please, without further ado, join me in welcoming Debra Diamond, PhD.
Thank you. Thanks, Elizabeth. And hello, everybody. And I'm so delighted to be here with you tonight. First of all, I have to say this is quite an organization. I mean, Elizabeth and all the folks who work with her are doing the work of the angels. It's extraordinary what she's built. And kudos to you for what you've done, and for all of you who are here and have joined. You're powerful, and you know, you're doing something that's I think just full of light. So I'm glad to be here with you tonight. So Elizabeth told you a little bit about my background. I have sort of an unconventional background for a psychic medium. I didn't set out to become a psychic medium in life. I didn't, you know, when I was growing up, I didn't think, geez, I hope I get to grow up and become a psychic. I mean, it just was nothing that ever occurred to me. But I did have a unusual experience in 2008. You know, when I was a money manager, I always kind of knew things. I'd have to read a lot. We always did a lot of reading, and I'd read these prospectuses and annual reports. And if I just picked them up, and I would know everything that was in it without reading it. And I didn't know how that was possible, but I didn't really spend a lot of time philosophizing about it either. I was busy. And so it wasn't until 2008, I took an intuition development class in New York. And I just did it for fun. I thought, you know, I had pretty good intuition. It'd be fun to tune it up. And I live in Baltimore. I went up to New York for the weekend. It was a weekend class, and there were about 25 people in the class.
Yo estoy casi llamando, Daisy. Yeah. No.
So there were about 25 people in the class, men and women. I didn't know any of them. And we did a few exercises in the morning, and I was getting everything. I didn't know how that was happening, but they were very low key. I didn't think too much about it. And then the teacher said, you know, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to have a seance. Can you imagine? I mean, that was nothing that I wasn't there for a seance. I thought this was just a, you know, little intuition development class. I thought about leaving, but then I thought, well, it's Saturday morning and this class runs through the weekend, through Sunday afternoon. And I'll just stay, nothing's going to happen anyway. And then we'll go on to the next exercise. So the teacher said, I'll put you in a meditative state. I'll put the class in, in a meditative state, and then I'll take you out of the meditation. And if you see anyone, you let me know. So I don't know if you all know what a seance is, but it's a ceremony where you connect with those who are in the afterlife. So this is nothing that I'd ever done before, believe me. So anyway, she said, I'm going to put you in a meditative state, and then I'm going to take you out of it. And if you see anyone, you let me know. I'll tell you what to do. So I thought, well, that doesn't pertain to me. I'm not going to see anyone. So we meditated, I meditated, and she took us out of the meditation and she said, does anyone see anyone? And I looked around the room and everyone was looking at each other. And I raised my hand and she said, yes, Deborah, what do you see? And I said, well, I see about 50 people. These were all people who had passed. Some of them were my relatives. Some of them went with the other students in the room. They were friends or loved ones of the other students. And then there were just some random people that weren't attached to anybody. I saw a couple of 42nd Street showgirls kind of prancing through the middle of the room. I mean, we were in New York. And so anyway, I was kind of overwhelmed. I didn't know what was going on. But the teacher said, well, do you see anyone in the corner of the room? She said, sometimes if there's someone in the corner of the room, in the top corner, they go with whoever's sitting in that corner. So I said, yes, I do see someone in the corner. And she asked me to describe him. And I said, I don't know how many of you know who Tony Orlando is, but he kind of looked like Tony Orlando. He was Hispanic. He had black hair parted in the middle, big handlebar mustache, big white teeth. And as I described him, the woman sitting in that corner said, I can identify him. That's my fiance. He died 2 years ago. So that woman said to me, if I show you pictures on my cell phone, during the break, will you be able to identify him? And I said, sure, because he was plain as day to me. So during the break, she came over with her cell phone and she flipped through it. And I said, there, that's him, And she said, yeah, that's my fiance. So she had wanted to hear from him. She believed in the afterlife. She thought she would hear from him, and she was very disappointed because she'd been waiting 2 years and had not heard from him. So she thanked me, she hugged me, and remember, I come from Wall Street, so there are no hugs on Wall Street and no thank yous either. So this was something that was completely new to me. But at the same time, I knew that I had done something meaningful for someone. I'd made a connection for her that she so desperately wanted. I didn't know how it happened, but it happened. So I was just very overwhelmed by all of this. And I stayed in that class through the rest of the weekend, and lots more things happened. We had another seance, and there was even more activity for me with that. So people were coming up to me and saying, geez, you must have been doing this, for a long time. And I said, I've never done this before. So it was pretty strange. Anyway, Sunday night, I drove home to Baltimore. And on my way home, I called my youngest son, who is very left brain and very logical. And I told him what happened. And he listened to me. He didn't poo-poo me. He didn't make fun of me. He didn't say I was making it up or it didn't really happen. He listened. And when I was all done, he said, well, that makes sense. We're just energy, and the energy has to go somewhere. When he said that, it was something that I could understand. It was really a cross between science and spirituality. We are energy. Everything is energy, and we continue to live and we continue to exist in a different form, but we're still us. We continue. So what he said to me, of course, what he said is not a new concept. I can't claim that my son was the one who came up with that. I mean, that idea has been around for thousands of years. The Egyptian culture, which is the oldest culture on earth, 5,000 years old. I mean, they believed in the afterlife. They had the Book of the Dead. And, for them, life was just one long continuum, including death. Other ancient cultures were the same. I don't know if any of you have studied any of these cultures. They're really fascinating. In the Inca culture, when someone died, they wrapped them up and put them in a chair, and they took them around with them to parties, and they would ask them their advice. And, they were very much part of the family. And in other cultures as well, ancient cultures. It's only been in the last, I would say probably 200, 150, 200 years that in the Western culture, we've gotten away from this idea that life continues. And I think it's because we've drifted in the Western culture so far towards Western medicine, which has a different view of life. They have a physiologic view of life, based on biology and physiology. That's what they study. So I understand. But, they've kind of taken the soul out of death. And I'm here to tell you, as a psychic and a medium, I talk to thousands of people. I read for thousands of people and I talk to thousands of people. And their loved ones are exactly the same. Their loved ones who've passed are exactly the same on the other side as they are here. Their personalities are intact. Their memories are intact. They're very comfortable. They're at ease. They're at peace. They feel good. And this is not just 1 or 2 or 10 people I've talked to in the afterlife. I mean, there are thousands. And it's a real thing. I think it's hard for people here to understand that, many people to understand that, because we think in terms of 3 dimensions here. We think we live in a house and we drive a car. So maybe the afterlife looks like that. You live in a house and, I don't know how you get around, but, I think people think of it as the same kind of 3D world, and it's not. It's a different dimension. And it's something that we can't imagine. We don't even have a language for it. Science doesn't have a language for consciousness. So even though we don't have that language, that doesn't stop everybody from coming in, everyone who's passed from coming into readings and connecting. They do this, and I don't know how many of you have had readings, but I was teaching a class over the weekend, and I was talking about mediumship and how oftentimes people come into mediumship readings, the sitter comes into mediumship readings with the thought that they might want to connect with this person or that person. And so often, our loved ones on the other side want to make these connections as well. They're waiting. They know everything that transpires here. They can see everything. They know everything that's happening. And when they see that somebody's having a reading, they can appear like that. And they're right there. I don't even really sometimes have to ask for them. They're right there. As a matter of fact, I'll hear them in my ear saying like, I'm here, I want to talk to mom, or, whatever. So it's consistent, is what I would say. So anyway, I became a psychic medium. It wasn't immediately after this, what happened to me at this class in New York. It took a while. It took a few years because people don't talk about these things that happen. But what happened to me was the basis for a transformative, it was a spiritually transformative experience. It took a few years for things to kind of settle out. And eventually I was, doing my work as a psychic and a medium. And I have to say that compared to the work that I used to do, this is a lot better because I get to help people. I never really felt that way about the work that I did on Wall Street. I mean, it was intellectually interesting, but it's a very much a dollars and cents business. So, helping people is not really part of your mission. But here it is, and that's very gratifying. And I have so many people who come to me and tell me that, I was a change agent for them or an agent of transformation. So that's something, money can't buy. So anyway, that's, so my work is as a psychic and a medium, but I also am an author. Hold on one second. And I've written, I'm back. I've written a couple books, and one has to do with near-death experiences. It's called Life After Near Death. And that one is about people who've had NDEs, near-death experiences, and come back with abilities and gifts they didn't have prior to the experience. And I wrote this book, which came out just about a year ago, called Diary of a Death Doula. This is a bestseller. And I am also a death doula. I don't know how many of you know what that is, or maybe some of you do this yourselves. But being a death doula, in my case, means sitting bedside with the actively dying at hospice. Now, death doulas are a fairly new phenomenon. I mean, the idea of sitting vigil at the bedside of the dying is nothing new. That's happened for thousands of years. But it's just recently become institutionalized so that people can study, train to become a death doula. And that's what I did. I did it because, I think you'll appreciate this. In 2001, my mother passed away. And we had hospice come to the house the last few weeks. And I don't know if any of you have had experiences with hospice, but I think they're pretty wonderful. I think they're just special people. And anyway, they were lovely. And at one point, one of the hospice professionals handed me a piece of paper and said, "You might want to read this." And I just set it aside. I wasn't sure, maybe it had to do with medication. I mean, I didn't know what it was. I just set it aside. But eventually I picked it up. And when I picked it up and I read it, it said, "If the body's ready and the soul isn't, you don't leave. If the soul is ready and the body isn't, you don't leave. When the soul is ready and the body's ready, then you leave." So, I read it over a couple times and I thought, wow, this is a lot more than I expected from hospice. And I had to think about this. This hospice professional was saying, death is a process. It involves body and soul. It's not just, the body, it's body and soul. So that really struck me. And, I thought about it, and I thought about it for a long time. I knew I wanted to be of service at hospice, and eventually I trained and I became a death doula. But I wanted to sit with the actively dying. You see, there are lots of different kinds of death doulas. Some get involved with a patient when they first come into hospice. So they could be with the patient for 6 months or longer. And they may listen to music together. They may just chat. They may do crossword puzzles. They could do any number of things. And then there are death doulas who might get involved with the families or with legacy projects or wills, and some even get involved with funeral arrangements. I didn't want to do any of those. I wanted to sit with the actively dying because I'm a medium. I talk to dead people. It was something that I knew it didn't scare me. So I knew I could sit with the actively dying. And so that's what I did. And now, being a medium, I had no idea of what, if anything, would happen, sitting bedside with the dying. I didn't have any expectations, and that wasn't really part of it. But, what happened over time was that as I sat bedside, this invisible world at end of life was often revealed to me, including many of the patients who would communicate with me telepathically, and their loved ones in spirit who would appear in the rooms pretty consistently would also talk to me. So there was, this curtain went up, and I was able to see lots of things that transpire at end of life. I think for most people in our Western culture anyway, if you've ever been to hospice or someone who's critically ill in the hospital and you see them, it could be a scary thing because they may be lying in a hospital bed with various tubes, wires connected to them, and it looks like nobody's home. I can tell you, though, there's nothing that's further from the truth. Their physical body may look may look kind of scary, but they may be non-responsive, but they are not unconscious. They are not unconscious. So let me repeat that. They may be unresponsive, but they're not unconscious. So what do I mean by that? So they're having their consciousness is still very active. They are often traveling and journeying outside their body. They're out of body traveling. They may be revisiting memories from their youth. They may be visiting their new home on the other side. They may be visiting with loved ones, friends and loved ones, on the other side. I mean, they're very active. Their consciousness is very active. They are in and out of their body. So when they're in their body, they're in their body. But they don't feel any pain because they're often out of their body and they're journeying. And this is part of the process at end of life. It's something that, unless you've had a shared death experience, which is a term that Raymond Moody coined, shared death experiences where something that happens either at the bedside of the dying or with the dying, and you either see it or experience it as well. So unless you've had that kind of experience, you may not know, these things, that the journeying takes place at end of life, but that's what happens. Now, what's so interesting about that is what I believe, there's no way to prove this, but what I believe happens, or is part of the process, is that every time they leave their body to journey, they sort of get tanked up at the universal gas filling station. They're out of their body, they're going into the universe, and they get a little bit of extra consciousness every time they do that. They return with a little more consciousness each time. That's at the same time that their physical body is declining, until at the end of the day, where their physical body has completely declined and their consciousness has blossomed. Okay, so so this kind of goes back to this idea that we are body and soul. It's not just about body. That the soul is an important part, that essence that makes us us. So now this idea, I mean, there's no way that it can be proved because, it's in another dimension. But I will tell you that when I've given talks and there are other doulas in the audience and I mention this, their faces light up and they start nodding because they've all seen it and they know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, I have a friend in New Mexico who's a hospice chaplain. And when Diary of a Death Doula came out, this book, she said to me, "Tell me a little bit about your book." And so I told her, this was to me the most profound and interesting thing that, I saw. And she listened. And when I was done, she said, "I know exactly what you're talking about." Now, she's a hospice chaplain. So that means that as soon as a patient is admitted to hospice, she's there, she's talking to them. And she continues to have a relationship with them up until the time that they die. So she's conversing with them all along. And she said, I've talked to these patients and they'll tell me, that they journeyed, that this is what they saw, this is what happened. And she said, every time they come back, they're a little bit different. So, I mean, I think people who've been around this aspect, understand this. Now, in case you're wondering how this kind of came together, when I wrote when I wrote Life After Near Death, my first book, this one, about near-death experiences. For those of you who know anything about near-death experiences, people, when they have a near-death experience, they die. You don't have to die, but that's in the popular culture. That's what everyone thinks. But they are out of body. They leave their body, but they return. They return back to their body to continue life. It's not like terminal physical death. But what happens to people who have near-death experiences is they come back with altered energy, which is why so many of them have these unusual abilities and gifts, and why for the majority of them, their lives change. They can't go back to their previous life because they're not the person that they were. They tend to be much more spiritual. They've gone through a transformative event. And so their energy is altered. So, near-death experiences share something with actual physical death, in that people who have NDEs pick up this extra consciousness but return to life. Whereas people who are terminally, who decline into terminal physical death are in and out of their body multiple times. Sometimes, maybe with your children, maybe not, but For people in hospice, they can be in and out of their body multiple times, each time picking up more of this consciousness. And what happens at the end of the day is they are, 100% consciousness or 1,000% consciousness. And that's them. That's their soul. That's their essence. They are who they are. They're still the same person. They just don't have the physical body. But that's okay, because in the other, in the afterlife, in this other dimension, you don't need it. It's just only here on Earth that we, that's the way we get around. So, there's a lot more I could say about all of this, but I know Elizabeth mentioned to me that, you guys have questions. So maybe
They always have questions, and there are so many in the chat box right now. So if you don't mind answering questions, everything that you've said has brought up some conversation. And I would just love to be able to ask you some of these questions. The first one that I have is, do you always see dead people, or I would say people who have passed over, people on the other side, or only when you want to? Do you see people when you don't want to, or always when invited? Are you able to turn it on and off?
yeah, I'm able to turn it on and off pretty much. Some people don't know. Okay, I'm just standing up now, so I need to stand up. But there are many mediums. I don't know if you all know the difference between psychics and mediums. Mediums are able to communicate with those in the afterlife. Psychics are people who bring in information that, that have to do with our lives, things about, work or family or health, things like that. So they're two different things. All mediums are psychics. Not all psychics are mediums. You have to go higher to be a medium, So anyway, not all psychics and mediums know that you can turn this off, because I talk to many people who say, this person came in and that person came in, and, that's a hell of a way to live, is all I can say. So that's not, something that I would generally do. I pretty much do this at will. However, there are times when someone will come in unbidden, and if they do, that's okay. But I don't walk around 100% open all the time. I don't think that's like really a good thing. So, and, and I'll say one other thing. I know a lot of people tell me, these are psychics, mediums, and then just ordinary people who say, I got a message from so-and-so, and so I told so-and-so about it, just because, and I feel like just because you get a message doesn't mean you have to pass it on. People, those on the other side are looking for openings. They're looking for ways to connect. And, as soon as they find a connection, they're right there because they want to connect. And that's okay. But it's a touchy subject, passing on these messages. There's a certain amount of therapeutic, there's a therapeutic methodology. You can't just kind of blurt out, this happened, because it takes people by surprise. So I don't do that. But most of the work that I do is in readings. Now, when I sit bedside with the dying, a lot of times they will just talk to me telepathically. So, and if they do, that's fine. But I don't, I'm not looking for that. Does that answer your question?
That's perfect. And I wanted to ask you, there are two different things. Being a death doula, are the dying afraid of passing? There's another question that goes along with this as well. Andrea is saying that when her father passed, she saw a tear rolling down his cheek. And she was wondering if you might know what that's about. I have a feeling that it was a tear of joy, but I just want to get your take on that. So could you tell us if the people that you've worked with are afraid of dying? And then secondly, if this tear is meaningful, and if you could maybe explain that.
So in terms of, if the folks are afraid of dying, it's a mixed bag. They're all people, and all people are different, right? Everyone's an individual. I find that the people who are very religious and have a lot of faith, they seem very comfortable. And oftentimes they see on their journeys, they see magnificent cathedrals and hear gorgeous choirs. They have that link to their faith and their religion, and it sort of eases their way, I think. But there are many, many people who are just very comfortable. As I said, they're out of body and they're having these beautiful experiences. And, oftentimes they'll say, and people who have passed have said the same thing to me, this is not, I didn't know it would be like this. It's like beautiful and joyful, and I've never felt this good. So as a matter of fact, there's sometimes people that I've read for who, like, let's say a daughter will come to me and she'll say, I want to try to contact my mom who passed away. And she said, my mom didn't ever believe in any of this stuff. So I don't know, if you're going to be able to connect with her. And, there have been many times where I've made those connections and the mom or the loved one will come in and say, I had to kind of revise what I was thinking. So it's, and I hear this from everyone, it's just, this is what they tell me. Now, when I wrote Life After Near Death, I did readings for all the NDEers, which meant that I went with them on their NDEs. We went back and recaptured their NDEs, and I was with them, and I could say the same thing. I mean, I felt like the experience was ineffable. That's a word that they use a lot in the NDE world. That means you can't describe it. We don't have the words for it. So same thing with folks at end of life. I think many of them, when they're out of bodies, are just having these beautiful experiences. Now, am I going to say 100% of them feel that way? No. There are, there are some who are afraid. I have to say that, and I don't know the reason for this, but the people who I sit with seem pretty comfortable. And I think it just may be because maybe I have a high vibration and, it just kind of helps them kind of glide right in. I don't really know, but they seem pretty comfortable and they just seem to be able to just go, they go when they want, or they hang around and go later. I mean, it just seems pretty graceful. Not all doulas have that experience. So, I mean, I've talked to other doulas, not all of them have that experience. So, there's no one size fits all. There's no one size fits all in life, and there's no one size fits all in death. Now, in terms of the tier, I can't tell you that because I would have to either do a reading or kind of look, at you and was this your father, you said, or your mother?
It was her father, I believe, Andrea's father. Let me go back to the question, and I'm sorry that there are a lot of questions that have been asked since then, so I have to go back up to find it.
Let me just quickly kind of look and see. What was your father's name?
Father, yes. Andrea, what is your father's name? Could you just, let's see. Andrea is saying it did look like he saw something beautiful. Thank you, Elizabeth, and everyone. Everyone's been talking about this in the chat box, that it was probably that it was just something that was so overwhelmingly beautiful. I want to ask.
I feel like I'll just say what I think that was about. Sure. He was. Did this happen right before he passed?
Yes, it was right before he passed.
Like seconds before, a minute before, or something. Yes, I think I think that. The whole vista opened up, and he had already seen it. He'd already experienced parts of it and glimpses of it, and that was all wonderful and good and fine. But it was sort of like the difference between, seeing a 5-second clip of Star Wars and then going to the 3D version with, the headphones and the, everything. I mean, it was just so extraordinary. It was so extraordinary. So I think that was just him processing it.
Kind of like Steve Jobs, right?
Oh, so, right. He said, oh, wow, oh, wow.
Oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow. So I have a question that is an anonymous question, but this is a newly bereaved parent, and he will be having his very first reading at the end of the month. He's planning to have an open mind, but he doesn't know what to expect. Is there any advice that you can offer him?
So it's a good question. I tell people to come into readings without any expectations. I think where people sometimes have an issue is they come into a reading expecting this, that, and the other thing. They're going to connect with this person. They're going to be told they're going to find their soulmate. They're going to be told they're going to find their perfect job or whatever. They have all these expectations. And the truth is that, you'll hear whatever spirit wants you to hear. And I don't do anything. I'm just the channel. People say to me, you did this. It's like, no, I didn't do anything. I'm just the channel that, everybody comes through. I'm the telephone line. I can't make anybody pick up the telephone on the other side, but I'm the line. And if somebody wants to pick up the phone, they'll use me. That's how it works. So I can't tell people in advance what they're going to find out in a reading because I have no idea. And I don't know what they're going to hear. I don't know until the reading starts and, everything starts coming in. But I would say, it's best not to have any expectations. It's also good if you have some questions, if there's some things that you'd like to know, jot them down. Many people come to readings with whole, books of questions, pages and pages of questions. And other people come into readings and say, just tell me what comes in. Now, the funny thing is oftentimes what comes in is also the same thing as what they were thinking of, and spirit makes sure, spirit will, it's going to, whatever is supposed to come in is going to come in. Now, before I read for people, I have guidelines for readings that I send to people because oftentimes people have never had a reading and they don't know what to expect. They don't have any idea what to expect. So I always send them my guidelines for readings. So they can read that before the reading and they have some idea of what a reading is and, the difference between a psychic reading and a mediumship reading and the kinds of questions you could ask. So in other words, readings are supposed to be provide you an opportunity for personal development, for spiritual growth. So they're not really so much fortune telling, although, a lot of people think that's what they are. So that means fortune telling means they come with, they want a yes or no answer. Should I leave my husband? Yes or no? Should I take this job? Yes or no? So the yes and no answers are not like really great. They're not going to help you grow. And also, I have to say, spirit doesn't like to give yes or no answers, because you have free will. You can make choices. Spirit can show you things, that are helpful to you in making your decision, but they're not going to make all the decisions for you because if they did that, I'd have a line from my house all the way to Elizabeth's house, and I live on the East Coast. I'd have a line of all these people waiting, to find out what they should do about every single aspect of their life. And that's not what we're here for. So, the kinds of questions to ask in a reading are like questions that begin with what, like, what should I know about this? So you can learn something, So now I understand when you're in a reading, people aren't always thinking so much with their left brain, like, okay, how should I phrase this question? But you can think about it in advance and, and know that you're going to hear, what you're meant to hear in this experience. I don't know who you're having your reading with. I find, a lot of people ask, how do I find a good psychic or medium? And I think a good way is if you know someone who's had a good reading with someone, and thought that person was good. I mean, I think that's a good way to go. There are so many psychics and mediums now. It's unbelievable. I mean, I used to do, before COVID, I used to do a lot of expos. And for many years, I was the only psychic and medium there. Then it got to the point where there were like 50 of them, at every expo. And I would go up to a lot of these people and say, how long have you been doing this? And they'd say, oh, I read this Doreen Virtue angel card book. Yeah. And now they're out there, so you got to be careful. They might be good. I don't know. But there's a lot of them, just like I was teaching a class and I was saying there are a lot of psychic mediums, and there was a woman in the class who was a housekeeper, and she said, there's a lot of housekeepers too. So it's just, that's the way it is. But I think finding someone through, someone else has had a good reading with them, I think that's a good way to go.
We are very fortunate because we have Mark Ireland who certifies mediums, and we have a provider page, and we have testimonials from parents. So if anybody's looking for someone good, and we need to get Debra on there, so I'll talk to her about that. But we're very, very careful to recommend psychic mediums who are or evidential mediums who are really, really good at what they do and very compassionate as well. I have another question that's very interesting that was up towards the top. Teresa's asking, you said that the spirit has the same personality as they were when they were as they had when they were alive. My son was very quiet and shy, kept to himself a lot. Does that mean that he may never come through with a medium?
So that's a great question. I'll tell you what happens a lot of the time. I'll be doing a reading for someone and they'll say, I want to connect with my mom. And they don't tell me anything else. They might tell me her first name. And the next thing is well, I'll tell you a true story. I was reading for a guy a number of years ago and he said, I want to connect with my aunt. And I said, okay. And he told me her first name and I was going to like get her. And then I hear this voice in my ear saying, why doesn't he want to talk to me? I'm his mother. He never wants to talk to me. So I said to this man, I said, I think I have your mother here. And he said, I don't want to talk to her. So I said, was your aunt kind of quiet? And he said, yes. And I said, okay. So, the mother was obviously not very quiet. And she came in, she like came roaring through that door. And the aunt eventually came through. But this is what happens. The ones who are, it's just like in real life, if you're outgoing, you're the first one in line, you're coming through. It takes sometimes a little bit more work to bring in somebody who's quiet, but I can usually get them. But they're quiet. I mean, if you're quiet, you're not going to be a chatterbox. I think of a reading I did with someone, her father actually was a professor at Hopkins. I didn't know that, but, and he had just passed and she didn't tell me that either. But, this guy came into the reading, her father, and he was very methodical and he was just, just very smart and very methodical. And I said to her, was he a professor or something? She's like, yeah, he was a professor at Hopkins. And he said everything he wanted to say, and he gave her all these instructions, and he was going to come back and talk to her some more. And then he was gone. And she said, that was my father. He was just very to the point. So, they don't change. So somebody quiet, they may talk, but they don't expect them to be a chatterbox. They don't, that's not their personality. But if they want to come in, we can get them. If they want to pick up the phone, as I said, I can't make anybody pick up the phone. But if they want to come in, they come in.
That's beautiful. Helen is asking, do loved ones who went years before, for instance, our children did know who has passed from the family, and are they there for them to help guide them as they cross over?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Definitely. They are there. And, I'm thinking of a woman I read for, this must have been about 3 or 4 years ago. She came in and I see chakras and auras. And the first thing I saw was her heart chakra. And it was she was heartbroken. And I knew as soon as I saw that she had lost, I was thinking it was a child. And I think she had lost 2 children in a traffic accident. And and it just happened, I think, 6 months before or something. And I saw the accident and I saw an uncle on the other side who appeared, just like when the accident happened, the uncle appeared to take these kids to the other side. And I told this woman, and she said, yeah, I mean, we loved him. That was the kids loved their uncle, and he stepped in and, he was there for them. And that's very typical. There was another woman I read for who lost a daughter. This was a very talented, bright girl. I mean, I didn't know the woman or the daughter, but I mean, I could see in the reading, this was just a very talented girl. And I'm not sure what happened. It might've been drugs, I think, but I think this girl was going for her Ph.D. at a very well-known school. And she died, and I saw her grandfather come in, her grandfather on the other side come in to escort her to the other side. And, I told the woman, and she said, she was telling me that the daughter had been very close to her grandparents, and both grandparents were on the other side. And it was like the daughter, when here, on Earth, the daughter used to always go over to her grandparents' house, and visit, and because they lived in the same town. So that was like part of her life. And when I saw her on the other side, as a matter of fact, I'm seeing her now, she sort of, goes back and forth, to her grandparents. And the mother that I was reading for was having a horrible time. She was just having a horrible time. She just couldn't get over her grief. She was just so beside herself. And her father came into the reading, the grandfather, and he said, listen, when your daughter came to our house, when she used to come to our house and spend time with her grandparents, you felt good about that, right? She's doing the same thing now. So the mother was like, okay, I have to think about that. But it was the same thing. The daughter's with her grandparents. She is over there like half the time, just like she was here on Earth. So, but her grandfather came in to get her, and they do that. There's a story that I tell in Diary of a Death Doula about sitting bedside with a patient, and the patient's mother in spirit came into the room, and also I think the aunt. And by the way, they, all in just about 100% of the rooms, the loved ones in spirit are there, and they're there to provide legacy, and the dying know that they're there, and it's very comforting to them. And the loved ones in the afterlife, often escort them to the other side. But I said to the mother, I said, why are you here? I talk to dead people, so I was like, I might as well talk to her. So why are you here? So she says, oh, well, this is what we do. She said, as soon as you pass, as soon as you cross over to the other side, this is like your assignment. This is like a job that was that's given to you. And she said, you would never turn it down. I mean, this is like part of what comes with, the deal, And so I said, well, how do you know when to come in? And she said, well, it's sort of like you have speed dial on your phone and you have memory. So, the same thing happens in this instance. I mean, there's just some instant transmittal. They get the message, they know everything on the other side. And they're not, contrary to some people's belief, they're not like hanging out in one house or one hotel or whatever. They're energy. They're not in physical form, but they can be anywhere at the same time. And so they get this like, it's like a dog whistle or something, I imagine, only they can hear it. And they appear, and they can instantly appear. So they come in. And that's what they do, so it's part of their job. I mean, I thought of it as sort of like jury duty in the afterlife. Better than that, but I mean, like, it's a civic responsibility. It's just something, they want to do it. It just comes with the territory, as my father used to say. So so the answer, that's a long answer to your question, but the answer is yes.
That's beautiful. I love it. And Kate is saying something that I just want to quickly say. I feel we have all gone through something like a near-death experience, having our children pass. I have really grown spiritually, and I am exploring the development of my new skills, which is just beautifully said. But I want to ask a question now. Patricia is saying, we've had pictures fly off the wall after the burial. Is that spirit?
It's probably spirit. I can't say that I'm not sure who's doing that. It could be your children, it could be others. I mean, but that is something that happens. It's an event that happens. They do a lot to try to get our attention. They can manipulate electronics. They can, manipulate cell phones. I've had so many people tell me, my dad passed. We still have his cell phone. He's been gone for 8 years now. And now I'm getting text messages, and it's disconnected. They just have the phone, but there's no contract with Verizon. So it's dead. It's like just the phone. And, they'll say there's like text messages, appearing on the phone now, and like with emojis that my dad would have used or something. So they can manipulate, their energy. They try to manipulate electronics. So it could be TVs, radios, cell phones, anything electrical. It's, they do whatever they can. They can't text us usually or email us, but they use whatever means they have to try to connect. Let me just say, because she said something very important that I think everyone on this call should know. You have all gone through a spiritually transformative experience if you've lost a child. or if you've lost a loved one, particularly, well, if you've, this is spiritually transformative experiences are experiences for which, you come back transformed, unable to go back to your previous life. Near-death experiences are subsets of spiritually transformative experiences. What creates a spiritually transformative experience? Oftentimes it's a traumatic experience, but it doesn't have to be physical trauma to you. It could be psychological trauma. It could be the death of someone close to you. It could be a divorce. It could, something that's very traumatic that shifts your energy. Now, if you're also sitting with someone when they passed, there's a lot of energy happening there with them, as they leave. And if you're sitting there, you're exposed to that. And that could cause a shift in your energy too. It's not something that's immediate. You're not going to walk out, you're not going to wake up the next day and say, I feel transformed. It takes time for it to kind of work through your system. But everyone who's had one of these events is going through or has gone through a spiritually transformative experience. It's not the kind of thing you can talk about. You can talk about it in this group, but you can't talk about it with the general public. You're not going to go to work and say, guess what happened to me? I had a spiritually transformative experience, because then nobody at work will talk to you again. Right? But you can talk, and it's great to have this group. I mean, this is like a 12-step group where, you could say anything, right? So that's good. It helps, because it's a lot to go through this, and people don't know what it means or what's involved. There's a lot involved. You basically get turned inside out and upside down. At the end, it works out okay, but it's a lot. So all of you have gone through this, if you've lost loved ones or children in particular. You could read about spiritually transformative experiences, so you'll know more about them and what to expect. I'm not going to take your time tonight to do that. But, the whole world, you're going to have a lot of company soon, because the whole world's going through a spiritually transformative experience right now. Guess who's going through trauma? The whole world. So, I kind of feel like within a period of, 2 to 7 years or something, there's going to be greatly enhanced consciousness here on Earth as a result of that, So
That's beautiful. And I want to say that the whole idea of the near-death experience, the shared death experience, the after-death communication, we've been speaking to Raymond Moody and to Evan Alexander, as well as to William Peters of the Shared Crossing Project, as well as, and we read Dr. Raymond Moody's book, Making Sense of Nonsense, and then discussed it. And when you're talking about that ineffable quality of trying to explain what's happening in the afterlife, it's so interesting, because Antoinetta is saying, my son was saying things that made no sense. Is this typical? This is when he was passing. My son did too, when he was in Tibet. And when I read Dr. Moody's book, it made so much sense. Do you see that as a death doula? Is that something that you also have experienced?
I don't see it, because it's very rare that the actively dying, this is the last 24 to 48 hours of life generally. That's the definition of actively dying, but the doctors don't always get it right, because, it's, if the soul's not ready, they're not going. But generally, these people are, they're not talking, they're not talking at all. So I'm not one of the doulas who comes, and does crossword puzzles and, discusses music with the patient. So my work is to sit quietly and to be the eyes and ears of the medical staff and the family. So it's very, very rare for them to talk.
Well, I love what you're saying about the fact that we all have gone through these spiritually transformative experiences, and you're exactly right. And I think that the most important thing to take away from that is that despite the fact that it is the hardest thing that we've ever experienced in our whole life, it's also something that's going to be the most spiritually transformative experience. And we are so fortunate, especially right now during this pandemic, to be understanding that there's more. And I think that that's what you're also alluding to the fact that we are part of those people who know that there is more and that this isn't it. we have so many questions in here, but we only have 3 minutes, and I don't want to keep you any longer than you are supposed to be on here, because I know that you're in pain. So we are so grateful. Are there any parting words that you might be able to give us before we end this and everyone says goodbye?
I don't, I guess I don't really have any, words of wisdom for you right now. I mean, it's just everything that I've said in the aggregate. But I would say, I think you all know this or understand this, that your children are still here. They're here, and they love you, and they're so happy when you connect with them. So, just continue to, you all are doing your work too. So just continue to do your work. And this group, I think, is just wonderful. I mean, when I was growing up, one of my cousins died. And, back then they didn't have things like this, So, I mean, Elizabeth has just brought grace, I think, into people's lives that, needed it so badly. And she's doing God's work. So, God bless her and God bless all of you. I will say that this is just a little commercial break. I will type my email address in the little chat box. So if anybody wants to get in touch with me, you can. Okay.
Well, Debra, we have 55 new messages that I haven't been able to address, and it's very rare that we have this many. But if you do type that, hopefully you'll be ready for a lot of questions. And I'm glad that you're willing to do this. And maybe we could have you come back again once, possibly in a month or so, or 2 months, whenever you're available to come back.
Yeah, I would love that.
Answer more questions for parents.
So I used to teach. I mean, it's you're sort of getting into dangerous territory here, because, if you ask me, I'll come and I'll talk a lot. So, I enjoy it, and I'm passionate about this, as you can see. So I love to help people, and this is, in a very small way, this is a way of helping too. So I thank you for the opportunity. And, if anybody wants to contact me, you can email me, or you can go on my website, Debra Diamond Author. And I think there's a contact page on there, so, and you could sign up for my newsletter. Oh, and I have a YouTube channel too. I forgot about that. I have a YouTube channel. So I'm so used to talking on other people's channels. So I also have a YouTube channel, and I do a lot of teaching on that. So, although, what I found out, I don't know what you found out, Elizabeth, about YouTube, but, I do all these teaching videos, and, we get, however many people listen to them. And then I do like a psychic prediction and video, and there's like 1 million people, listen to that. It's still kind of discouraging, because I really just like to teach, but this is, what are you going to do? So,
well, I just also want to say that people are saying, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, Debra. Thank you, Debra. Thank you. Appreciate this so much. She's so amazing, amazing speaker. Thank you. Yes, bring her back. We really would love to listen to your so refreshing, awesome presentation tonight, and on and on and on. So I'll send you the chat box as well, so that maybe you can identify the people when they are reaching out to you, if that's okay.
Sure,
and
sure.
Irene, have you unmuted or let everybody unmute so that they can say goodbye
to themselves and say goodbye.
So please, everyone,
thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Deborah.
Thank you.
Feel love. You're feeling better.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting, Elizabeth.
Toto. Maravilloso.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. We loved it.
Very informative. Thank you. And good night.
Yes,
And
thank
Irene and
you,
Elizabeth.
everyone.
Yes. Good night,
Great.
everyone.